Pollinator decline, information and awareness. This video is brought to you as part of a BIP, the Big Idea Project. What's the big idea? To what extent do human influences impact the natural world? The topic at hand? To what extent do human influences impact pollinator species, both positively and negatively? First, I will discuss the role of pollinators in their ecosystems. Next, I will discuss the issue of pollinator loss, what causes it, and the effect it has on our environments. Third, I'll talk about what organizations are doing to address the issue. And finally, I will discuss what you, the audience, can do to help combat this issue. Section 1. Pollinators play a significant role in upkeeping ecosystems globally and help us survive. I'd like to begin with a statistic. More than 75 to 80% of flowering plants depend on the movement of pollen by pollinators to reproduce. This aids in biodiversity and the integrity of ecosystems, as the movement of pollen by pollinators helps produce more flowering plants, increasing the variation in the environment and the heterogeneity. This increased heterogeneity in the environment makes the environment more resilient to change. Pollinators also provide many ecosystem services and benefits to us. For example, 35% of crops grown for human consumption are fully dependent on pollinators to grow. That is 1 out of 3 bites of food that we eat. The plants produced with the help of pollination also provide us clean air and upkeep the energy cycle. Furthermore, pollination provides us economic benefits. John Reed of the Ohio State Department of Entomology said that $500 billion a year are provided to the global food production industry because of pollinators. Pollination also holds many contributions to the food chain, both indirect and direct. For example, many animals rely on the fruits, seeds, nectars, and other parts of flowering plants in their diet. These plants are reproduced with the help of pollinators, and this creates more predator-prey relationships in the environment. Pollinators also play a direct role in the food chain, as they feed more than 80% of the birds in the US, and alongside that they feed other reptiles, amphibians, and mammals. Section 2. Pollinators are in decline due to various factors, and that has impacts on the environment. For one, there are factors which cause loss of habitat for pollinators, and that has negative effects on their populations. Such factors include clearing for wood, clearing for agricultural land, and the development of human settlements. These all make it so that pollinators can't find enough food, nectar and pollen from flowering plants due to the clearing of their land. Certain agricultural practices, such as the use of pesticides, insecticides, and herbicides, cause for chemicals to leach into soil and causes the source of nutrients for many pollinators, the plants, to become toxic. Many diseases and fungi are also responsible for the loss of pollinators. For example, chalkwood disease, a fungi, targets the larvae of many bee species, causing them to starve to death, lowering the population of newborn larvae. Nosema disease spreads to pollinators when pollinators ingest its spores. These spores enter the stomachs of the pollinators and begin to grow in there, consuming the nutrients that the pollinator eats. This leads to starvation within the pollinator, as the pollinator isn't able to consume its own nutrients. Instead, the nutrients are eaten by the spores. Some other causes for pollinator decline include invasive species and climate change. Invasive species, such as the varroa mite, small hive beetle, Asian giant hornet, European paper wasp, and other invasive species, drastically lower the population of bees and pollinators similar to the honeybee. Climate change also affects pollinator species, as climate change alters the habitats that pollinators rely on to survive. Climate change can also cause for invasive species to move into changed habitats of different areas that pollinators live in. Here are a few consequences of the loss of pollinators. For one, there is a 5 to 8% decline in food production worldwide, depending on the country. There's also a reduced biodiversity due to the loss of pollinators. Pollinators play a significant role in the reproduction of flowering plants, and with the pollinators declining, there's also a decline in the amount of variation found in different ecosystems. There's also an increased risk of trophic cascades. As pollinators are a part of food chains, food webs, if pollinators decline, there are lowered predator-prey relationships, which affect higher trophic levels as they lose food sources. And as pollinators can help less plants reproduce, primary consumers lose a food source, which affects higher trophic levels. Finally, all other animal species lose habitat as well. Many animal species rely on the plants around them as a source of habitat, to hide from predators, to seek shelter, among many other things. And as these plants can reproduce less without pollinators, there are just less plants around to form habitats for other animals. Section 3. Pollinators are being aided by many organizations. One example being the Pollinator Partnership, Canada, which works to protect and foster pollinators and their ecosystems through extensive research, advocacy, and habitat conservation efforts. Another is the Bee Conservancy. The Bee Conservancy supports bee populations by advocating for and using sustainable beekeeping practices, establishing habitat for bees, and providing educational resources regarding pollinators. Finally, there is the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation, which conducts scientific research to engage in conservation efforts to influence legislation for the protection of bees and other invertebrate pollinators. Finally, Section 4. Pollinators can be aided by your own effort. You can do multiple things, like planting wildflower gardens to re-establish habitat for pollinators. You can also advocate for the issue on social media, or by telling your family, or going to workshops and gatherings. You can also support environmental organizations by donating or volunteering. And finally, you can support local farmers using sustainable methods of agriculture. Finally, I'd like to thank you for watching this whole video. Here are the donation pages for the charities I mentioned, and have a good day.